Are you sure about this? It's a long goal. Okay, there you go.
How's it going? Front row.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, how's it going? All right, well, let's get started. Glad you're here. Hope your week's been progressing well. We're continuing with our series. I had handouts. I printed them. They're at my office at OC. So be very productive for you there. Maybe I'll try to bring them next time as well. But yeah, we're continuing our series, right? We're talking about peace beyond understanding. We chose that verse because somehow in Jesus, there's this idea that there is a peace that goes beyond understanding, as in doesn't easily make sense. It's not typical. It doesn't fit the circumstances. There's something about the presence of God in Jesus that gives us access to something else. And so we're kind of walking our way through that. We spent the first month, or we got a quarter here. We spent the first month talking about using Genesis, the first few stories there, trying to help get a picture of how the Bible introduces the idea of what we were meant to be, what we turned out to be, the mess that's there, the presence of God, the significance of the presence of God. So we walk through those stories. Now this month too, our next stage here of the class, we're going to use some things that we've been learning, Austin and I. Austin's there already, fully licensed, ready for any and all cases. I'm in the student space, still working through some of that. But things we've learned that, like these different models of therapy. And the reason why we wanted to approach it that way is not to say any one of these models is some kind of magic thing and just do that and forget Jesus. Quite the opposite. It's each model has to find a way to frame what's the problem, what's the solution, and how do we get there? Right? If your model doesn't do that, it really ain't helping. And so it's interesting how each one of these models, and we got 4 of them we're going to look at, focuses on it differently. And my hope is that through any of these, it might resonate with you a little bit and might add some clarity. And of course, that's gonna just help inform what the Bible already does. The more and more I study these models, the more and more I'm like, yeah, saw that in Jesus. Yeah, read that in Genesis. Oh, Paul was doing that. Oh, look, Peter is addressing this. But somehow folks caught on to it somewhere else, and you can sanitize God out of it. But nonetheless, okay, so here we go. We're going to talk about distorted cognition, fancy way of saying the stuff we're thinking. right? There's some distorted thought process that we have, and what's the impact of that? Here's how often we conceptualize what's happening in our lives, right? We think that there's these things out there, external things that we can call triggers that have to do with, and here's just a few of them, right? There's stressful situations, might be some deadline, financial difficulties, there might be some negative interactions, arguments, criticisms, rejection. There might be sometimes we got some sensory stuff, just a lot of too loud, too busy. Some traumatic events in the past might be triggered. Then there's some things that just mess with us, like alcohol, drugs, caffeine. Not to say those are all equal. And then just relationship stuff, people's words, people's actions, people's attitudes. And normally just that little circle there's us going about our day. There's these outside things that input into our lives. And then we have our emotions. And those just light up, right? So if my boss is unreasonable and my boss is making demands and he's just, yelling at me, well, I might get angry. I might get frustrated. I'm driving. I'm challenged with this experience just about every time I drive on the turnpike to go to OC. I'm like, apparently it doesn't take much to be a driver, right? There's some people that are on their phone. They're like driving with their knee, eating a bowl of cereal. I'm like, and now that I'm learning some things, as people like cut you off and speed, and as you catch up with them, they like speed. I'm just like, yep. He probably has some childhood unresolved trauma. I don't think that guy's mama hugged him enough. So here I am diagnosing folks. It's been quite fun. And then we're like, of course I'm angry. Of course I'm frustrated. We got people that are horrible drivers. Same thing, maybe some issues at home with your kids, your spouse. And so that's why my emotion flares up. Because these outside things. And that's a lot of ways that we think. There's a direct correlation between input, emotion. Something's happened, something's done, something, I face something out there, my emotions come to life. And we make that direct link between one and the other. Of course I'm angry because of, fill in the blank, right? Of course I'm upset. Of course I'm frustrated. Of course I'm... All right. Well, there's this one thing called cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, that presents it a little differently. And CBT is this interaction between feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. And according to CBT, that there isn't a direct correlation between input and feelings. There's actually something else happening, and it's the thoughts we have. And these thoughts are that your emotional and behavioral issues stem from distorted, irrational thinking, not from the input. Think about that for a second. So you're angry not because somebody cut you off, and then you start to drive, you're riding the bumper, you're honking the horn, and you're just, like, I'll show you, that kind of thing. Not because somebody cut you off, but because of some thought process that's going in your head. Anybody twitching a little bit about that?
Well, how'd they come up with that?
Right.
You cut me off has nothing to do with anything else going on in my life.
Well, let's unpack that, shall we, Bob? So the goal of this therapy is to then help bring the thoughts to surface because they hide underneath the emotions. The emotions we feel, it's clear, like we feel it, right? Like, you just tense up, you're flooded, you start to twitch a little, like your eyes get wide, you just feel that pressure, you feel the tension, like you feel it. I know I'm angry. I know I'm frustrated. I know I'm, righteous indignation. And so that's obvious. Duh, that happened. This is the feeling. Well, it's almost like if you have brights on, right? You can see the brights, but you can't see the driver. Right? You can't see what's standing behind the brights because they're just flooding your vision. And in what this theory would do is to let's see what's behind the feelings. And you're like, my spouse is behind. Well, let's see what's behind. What are you telling yourself about that trigger, about that event, about that person, about that, boss? You're telling yourself something. And what would that be? Well, let's walk ourselves there, right? So, okay, just once more. So there's the little dynamic there. And the thing is, the arrows go every direction, right? Thoughts create feelings, feelings create behaviors, behaviors reinforce thoughts. So it's not just a linear thing. It's this. But normally we put the thoughts out and we just think there's input, feelings, then I act. But it's more complex than that. So.
Real quick question before you move on.
Yeah.
So, how come sometimes you can laugh it off and say, well, it is, and go on,
Yeah.
be a moron and laugh at it and think, I'm not gonna let you bother me. And then other times, it just goes all over you.
That's good, because there's some thoughts behind that. That's what's making the difference. That what you're telling yourself. And like I said, sometimes there's an awareness, you might even say it out loud. Other times there isn't. You just feel. But yeah, the thoughts.
Your bucket is full, like you're emotionally dysregulated because you've had so much stuff
Yes.
dealing with, you just can't take it anymore.
There's also that, but there's been a thought process coming that leads to you just feeling easily triggered. Like you're full because there's been a thought process coming, and that just puts it over the edge. So those are good. We're going to get there. Okay, so here's some foundational biblical concepts. Paul seemed to be in tune with this when he said, do not conform to the pattern of this world. How? That's easily said. Don't conform to the pattern of this world. Well, but I'm in this world. Everything's I'm like input. It's inputting me. Like I'm in this world. How do I not? Well, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. There's something that you need to think differently. The world's still going to be the same, but you can think differently, and that will change how you act. That will change your response to that reality. So the world's still the same. We're going to think differently. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So let's backtrack. I want to know the will of God in my life. Is that a statement that's probably fair of most? Okay. How do I do that? Just read the Bible. Okay, that's yes. But you're reading the Bible to change the way you think. And if you change the way you think, the world's still the same, but you interact with the world differently. And the more you interact with the world differently because you change the way you think, because you're letting God guide your thoughts, the more you understand what God wants from you as you face that world. Right? But there's a thought process that has to change. If we keep thinking the way the world thinks, we're going to keep acting the way the world acts. We're going to keep responding the way the world acts. We're going to respond. The switch is in the thought. the thought process. Another way, Proverbs 23:7 says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Okay, wait a minute. Like, I'm thinking in my heart. Isn't that like where my emotions reside? Well, in the ancient mind, it was all one thing. Like your heart, your mind, it's there. That's where it's at. So the way you think is the way you act. And the way you act is a reflection of the way you think. And now we put feelings in there. And so that dynamic is important. Another, you guys like that picture right there? Like this picture right here? They're all AI produced. I just went in there, inputted some stuff. Here I think I just put distorted cognition. Here I put peace and tranquility. Oh, that is kind of peaceful. Okay. So in Matthew chapter 6, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life. Yeah, it's easy for you to say. You don't know the life I have. Okay, now he's not saying don't worry about your life because you have a life that's not worrisome. That's not the point. You might have a horrible life. You might have a reasonably decent life. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, about what you will wear. Is life not more than food, and the body more than clothes? Well, if I ain't having those things, I don't know how long that life's going to go. Look at the birds of the air; they do not sow, reap, but God takes care of them. So if you keep, what Jesus is saying here is not, don't worry because your life is easier or because it's better. Because in reality, historically, their lives was going to get worse. And it did. Like the next 40 years, persecution intensified, the tension between Rome and Israel intensified, war was breaking out, there's all these, like, the rebels are going at it. There's, Rome, and within the Roman government, there's some changes going on, and eventually Titus is going to bring the army and he's going to burn it down. So it didn't get easier. Yet Jesus says, don't worry. And then he also says, you know what? You shouldn't worry about tomorrow, because guess what? Tomorrow's going to have its own worries. Right? There in Philippians, Paul talks about, do not be anxious about anything. Paul just didn't live in 2024 or 2020, right? Say we had a pandemic 2020, but I would say we've been having a pandemic for quite a while, and it's called anxiety. Everybody, our cat has anxiety. Literally has anxiety. Like, I need to give her some pills. Like she just, like if we have company, they're like outside cats, but they come in. So normally open the door, she comes in, but she comes in already skittish. She comes in, she goes and just runs off. Like she'll start and stop and go and then turn around and leave. She just senses a disturbance. Our cat has issues. So everybody in the cat, normally I say everybody in the dog, everybody in the cat's anxious. Well, here's a solution. Don't. You're glad you came. Right? Just going to write me a book. It says, don't be anxious. The solution to your problem. Yeah, but okay, Paul, that's cute and all, but is that like, how, right? How? In every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God. So what is Paul saying that, at least in that sentence, is part of the solution towards non-anxiety? But so what? Is prayer magical? Is it an incantation if I say it just right? Right? What is behind the act of prayer in Paul's mind?
The faith you have that it will be taken care of.
That we have a God that loves us, that is listening, that is active, that is involved, that is in charge. That's what's behind the act of prayer. Prayer ain't magic. Ain't magic. But there's a thought behind the prayer. Right? What else did it say? And so, if I'm not anxious, that's the goal. That's the feeling. Like I'm anxious. I have to not have that feeling. How do I not have that feeling? I act. Right? Remember, you have feelings, thoughts, and action. So I have a feeling of anxiety. Paul wants me to act, and what's my action? Prayer. But what's behind the action of prayer is the thoughts that I believe God to care and love me and listen. And so that dynamic action of prayer, the thoughts that make me pray, that makes my anxiety go down. Does that make sense? And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Well, what else, Paul? Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, anything that's excellent or praiseworthy, I want you to think about such things. That also changes your anxiety. Because what's anxiety? Anxiety is a feeling. What am I thinking behind the anxiety that makes me anxious? What's anxiety about? Fear of?
If you need a fight or flight.
Okay, that's when you're triggered, right? Your mind, there's this thing called parasympathetic and parasympathetic. Like your mind is triggered in a couple different ways. Your mind can ramp up, as in like, back to my skittish cat. I was out mowing once, doing some yard work, and the cat's out there, and all of a sudden I hear her like, and jump like this high. And I go out there, worried, and I go out there. By the time I get there, she's just sniffing and like more chill and everything. And what it was a water hose in the grass. Why was she anxious? She didn't have to stop and think. Her sympathetic just kicked on. It just ramps up. You fight or flight. In her case, it was both. Why? Why was that triggered? Right? A fear. An anxiety. So is anxiety bad in that case? What if it was a snake? You don't need to stop there and think, let me make a PowerPoint and think of 17 ways. Should I stay? Should I go? Let me call a friend. Let me check an app. You just need to be triggered, right? Okay. But here's the problem. Once she smelled it, and she's like, this does not smell like a snake. Right? Then she's licking herself and calming herself and, over there. And I'm petting her. Her anxiety just goes. Here's the problem, though, the way we live. It's just ramped up on all day long. So it doesn't have the parasympathetic, the whole rest and digest and brings you back down. So there is a purpose for anxiety. If I have a test coming, what gets me to study? Anxiety. Yeah, fear of failure, right? So I feel anxiety because I'm thinking, if I don't get ready, I'm going to fail the thing. There's a thought process there.
Or you freeze.
Or you freeze, right? Yeah, that's another response. I'm just going to watch TV, or I'm going to scroll through social media. It's me trying to deal with the anxiety besides actually getting things done. Okay, so what Paul is saying here, if there's anything praiseworthy, he just says it 10 different ways. The more you put in your mind positive things, the more you realize God loves you, the more you focus on the positive, the good, the Jesus, love, spirit, the more you put that in there, your thoughts are going to impact your anxiety. They're going to lead you to pray more and more. So there's this dynamic that's going to happen, and what's going to be brought down is the anxiety. not the things around you that make you anxious. That's still going to go on. Might even get worse. Your response is brought down. Right? Okay. Let's talk about the serpent. That's also AI. You like that? I prompted like the serpent in Genesis and the tree, and that's what came out. Okay. So CBT also focuses on what are our distorted cognition? What patterns of thinking do we have that are the problem, that are problematic, that are behind fueling, intensifying the feelings? Well, if we think of Genesis, as one should, the serpent says to Eve, then Adam, right? You will surely not die. For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. The serpent here is playing off this desire to know more, and actually is using a distorted cognition to fuel a whole lot of problems. Right? And the cognition, the problem here is the illusion that we could be like God without God. And that is going to fuel a whole world of problems. The next several stories are all fueled by that illusion, right? And we've been talking about that already. Okay, let's walk through some of these common distortions. The one is the all or nothing thinking. It's like seeing the situations in black and white categories without acknowledging the gray or middle ground. And I think this is especially problematic and difficult for Christians because we want and believe there is a truth. And if we start talking about gray or nuance, or it gets sticky, like we just start twitching because somehow what we're hearing is there isn't a clear truth. Let me be crystal clear. I believe there is a truth. I believe Jesus is the truth. I believe God has a path for it. So hopefully y'all know me well enough to not hear me say anything different. However, that doesn't mean you are perceiving the truth. Let me give you an example. We had football this weekend, right? Who won? Oh, let's go with OU, because otherwise it starts, getting problematic. So, OU. OU did well, right? I watched it. So I watched it from the comfort of my home, sitting there on my chair, and, I think I was petting my cat and, just having a snack. Okay, did I watch the game? Did I experience reality? Watch the game. I saw the outcome. Is there any way to perceive the end differently? Or one won, the other lost. The numbers are there, right? So it's not that we're interpreting the situation differently. It happened. There was a reality to it. There's a truth to it. There's a result of it. But what if I was at the game? Would I have experienced it differently? What if I am actually cheering for the other team? Would I have experienced it differently? Even if I was at the game, I'm not seeing, depends on what side you're sitting at, depends at what level you're at. Like, you're seeing a part of the experience. Does this make sense? Because you can't just see every angle, what about the guy that was getting nachos when there was a touchdown? He was having a true experience, but he didn't get all of the experience. Now, I didn't get a nachos, so I also didn't get all of the experience. Right? I had to go to the bathroom. I can just pause it. The poor guy couldn't, right? So, do you see what I'm saying? It's not that there isn't a truth and everybody gets to construct their own truth. That's problematic. The problem is when you think you see all of the truth. You ever been in an argument with a spouse? Becky's giving me an eye back there. This is all theoretical, has nothing to do with our life whatsoever. Right? And you come out of there experiencing it completely different. And then later you're trying to recall the situation. But you said this, but that's not what I said. Like, you're like, what is happening here? I was there. Well, so were they. It's you're seeing there's more to the story than meets the eye. And a distorted cognition is when you just want to simplify it to the most common denominator. You said this because this is what you meant. The end. Right? And it's done. Now, there's a reason we do that. Because it's easier when it's simple. Those people vote for that person because they're idiots. The end. Well, guess what? They also think that of you. Could it be more complicated than that? Okay, maybe everybody's an idiot. Okay, no, that's another possibility. Like, it's more complex than black and white. Everything, it's not simple. It's not simple. It's nuanced. It's complicated. Nobody's 100% anything. You're 100% evil. You're 100% good. It's not that simple either. And when we just make simplistic categories, it gives us comfort because it's a lot less to think about. And it's easier to box folks. And we just dismiss and move on. But it's not correct. It's just not correct. In Ephesians, Paul talks about how we're all saved by God's grace and not by our doings. Like, yeah, that's great. But I'm a good Christian. Yeah, but you're not saved by your efforts. You're saved by God's grace. Oh, of course. Wink, wink. But I came to church. Like, we know it, but we're kind of struggling with it because we want some kind of merit system as long as we're doing it, right? But the grace of God it's just weird. It's just weird. Seems unfair depending how you look at it. But it's just the grace of God. That's how we're saved. Everybody good? Everybody? Okay. Catastrophizing? Somebody say that. Yes, thank you. That one. That's when we expect the worst. Sometimes this is when we spiral. Sometimes I do that, right? Like, I get a flat tire. I'm like, of course I did. What's next? Probably going to rain. And then guess what? It starts raining. I was like, yep, God hates me. Right? What's next? Probably going to get home. My wife's going to yell at me. And then my cat, like, the world's going to end. And we just intensify everything. But it's almost, it's a protective measure. We're trying to do that to set our expectations so low. I have a headache. It's a tumor. No, it's not a tumor, right? Like, we set our expectations so in hopes that once I face a version of it, I'm like, maybe that wasn't that bad. But it's a protective measure. We just spiral. There was this lady in Clinton where Becky and I lived there right out of school. And I made the mistake once. I barely knew her, so I made a mistake once. I was a youth minister there, brand new, and I was like, hey, how's it going? She goes, I have a headache. She's like, it's probably a tumor. Oh, yeah? And I'm thinking, it's not a tumor. Like, but I don't know her well enough to say that. And she goes, yeah. And then here's what's going to happen. Like, I don't have good insurance. And I'm just going to, like, lose everything. I already don't have much. And then I bet some of these Christians aren't even going to help me. And here's what's sad. Like, I have a cat, and who's going to take care of my cat? Who's going to take care of my cat? I'm going to pray. Like, so then I just avoided her like the plague. because she would just, and I'm not exaggerating, she would just, and occasionally she, like my office, there was the preacher, we had a glass that looked outside in the parking lot. I would see her car coming. I'd just get up, go to the bathroom or something. She would come in and just talk to the preacher like 2-3 hours of nothing but this. It's like, God bless Pat, like our preacher. Like, yeah, but chapter 6 is do not worry, not because there's not things to worry and not because things might not get bad. It's because how does that thought process benefit you? Because then you start acting bitter, then you start acting sad, then you start acting angry, then you start like, of course God's going to let this happen. Of course this is going to happen. I'm probably going to get fired, And then you start acting in ways that almost make some of that be more likely to happen, right? Because we have this intense thing in our head. Overgeneralization. You take a single negative event, which happened, right? You're not making that up. You take a single negative event and you assume it will always happen. Right? It will always happen. And then sometimes you project that onto other people. So like, say you had a kind of difficult dating relationship. You're like, yep, all men are losers. Well, perhaps a good amount of us, but not all of us. Like, women are the worst. Well, we just project on everybody else. So then you start thinking, everybody is like this. Every group of this people is this way. We just project out a very limited experience. Lamentation says God's mercies are new every morning. You know what that means? Every morning might be a new beginning. Now, you might think like, okay. Yeah, the writer of Lamentation is writing because Jerusalem is being burnt down, and like the likelihood of Israel ever being a thing again is like a maybe. And he's right, yep, every morning, it's a new beginning. A new mercy, like it's a new mercy. The fact that we have a new morning is a merciful act. And so it doesn't do us good to generalize. And we do a lot of that. We're like, once again, I don't know if there's just a certain safety in doing that. I don't know if I can trust you. I had this one negative experience. I'm just going to trust nobody. I'm just going to do that. Maybe it's just easier. It's simpler. Emotional reasoning. This is a favorite of some people. It's the idea that if you feel it, it's true. If you have a feeling, it's true. If you have a negative feeling, that is the truth. That somehow your emotions are reasoning. Like that is reason. And so if I don't feel good, I must not be good. If you made me feel sad, like it is absolute truth, your feeling. What's the problem with that? Yes, your feelings are often inaccurate. What else? I'll give you an example. There's a client I'm seeing. It's a couple. It's been a long journey. I have a co-therapist, which has been a fun interaction. And they were talking about a very negative interaction they had recently, which often is very triggering. Then she gets, she starts to get very intense. He shuts down. She talks more. He shuts down more. Like then he says something very snippy and hurtful. And then she shuts down, and then he gets intense. Like it's a fascinating dynamic. And they were describing an event where it started kind of conflictual at home, and then the wife said something, and he said she apologized. And I thought, that just made me feel like more at peace. I was less tense. Then I was softer towards her. And I was like, and he was like saying this as a good thing, which it is, right? He's like, and then she goes, which very low, insight on her part. She goes, I didn't apologize. He's like, but you said this, you said this. She goes, that's not what I was trying to do. He goes, what? And then it just, okay? So two things. What changed in that situation? One version of him is responding with kindness, softness, understanding, and, positivity. The other version of him is like, ah. What's the difference? Perception. His thought. She apologized. And then, oh, no, she didn't. Right? So the thought intensified one direction or the other. Like it brought it down or it intensified. But the thought was, her behavior was almost indifferent because he told himself she apologized. Right? And later she backtracked, which, oh, it kind of, that's, we just go from there. But emotions, yes, you are truly feeling that emotion. That's important. I'm not denying you're not feeling whatever. But that does not mean that's what's happened. That's what you're feeling. That doesn't mean it's a reflection of what happened. I feel unsafe. Okay, that's a fair feeling. That does not mean the person you're feeling that from is unsafe. Maybe he is, maybe she isn't. But one does not equate with the other. Does this make sense? Especially, go ahead.
Sometimes when you have that belief around negative emotions, that feeling, you act a certain way that reinforces
Yes.
that negative feeling.
Yeah.
So you feel justified in that feeling.
Yes. Yes, that's another good way to put it. We feel justified. We feel it, we feel justified, we believe it to be true, and the end, right? But it could be our perception. There's a thought process behind that emotion. But often we don't even realize that, right? We just think the facts made me feel this way, so this is factual, the end. And a lot of times it doesn't matter what the facts are. Right? We just have the feeling. So back to Philippians, we just need to put positive things in our minds. All right, so those are some distortions. What do we do with some of this? I think, first of all, you got to recognize your limitations. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Why not? I have a brilliant mind. Well, yes, and I'm also very humble. What should I be doing? Fear the Lord and shun evil. Like, I shun evil because I trust God that tells me to shun evil and helps me define what evil is. Anybody wake up in the morning and said, today I'm going to worship the serpent? I would say said no one ever, but there's actually a Church of Satan. But besides them folks, so how are we doing some wild things or some evil things? Why would I need to shun anything? Because I'm wise in my own eyes. I think I know what's happening. I feel what's happening. Well, maybe there's a distortion there. You got to elevate the positive input, right? What Philippians says, anything that's excellent, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, you got to think about those things. You got to elevate that. More positive input, more positive input. Challenge your narrative. I think this happens a lot in relationships. We have a little story we tell ourselves about people's intentions. And we believe that to be true. Of course it's true. I feel it. It happened that one time. And that narrative we repeat and tell ourselves and keep assuming that person is doing this because of, and then that's just how we treat them. And it doesn't matter if they say that's not it or they change or whatever. It doesn't matter because we keep the narrative. Here's the thing though, many of us don't know we have a narrative. We don't know we have a little story we tell ourselves. We just think, you did this, I felt this, that's the truth. That's the immediate correlation. Actually, there's a thought process you tell yourself in the middle. We do that with our kids, we do that with our spouse, we do that with others, we do that with our boss, we do that. Like, we tell ourselves a little story. Now, how we got to that story, there's a whole lot of things. A lot of it has to do with our past struggles, and very little to do with the person in front of us. Like, we're going to talk about attachment later, so I'll let Austin take us down that fun memory lane of blaming our mamas, right? I mean, like, we tell ourselves a story. We have to challenge that story. Do not conform to the patterns of this world. There's a repetitiveness, a pattern we tell ourselves. Do we even know it? Next time you're angry, upset, annoyed, ask yourself, what am I thinking? Well, because she did this. What am I thinking? Well, she doesn't love me. He's a horrible person. You're thinking something. Then challenge that. Because here's why we don't do a lot of this. And then we need to interrupt the cycle, right? Here's why we don't do a lot of this. Because if we really take the time to consider this as a possibility, that maybe this is what's happening, then a lot of the misery we have is because of our thoughts. And that's a painful realization. Remember, wasn't it Abraham Lincoln, people are as happy as they set their minds to be? I hope he's wrong. Because then, wait a minute, I'm having a miserable X, Y, or Z. Am I choosing this? Not intentionally. But there's a thought process there somewhere that's either keeping you there, furthering it, or keeping you from getting out of it. And if you disagree, Jesus still loves you, and share all your thoughts with Austin, because he'll be happy to guide you through why you're wrong. All right. Next time, are we talking about attachments next time? Yeah. Prepare yourselves. It'll be good. I already blame my parents, so it's fine, right? It's all to blame. All right, let's close with a prayer. Dear God, we thank you for today. We thank you for the privilege to be about your kingdom. We thank you for insight that you have given us. We thank you for the ability to collaborate with your presence, with your word, with our experiences, that you guide us, that you help us have illumination to our lives, to our thoughts, to our feelings, to our actions, and realize that we can act our way into better, we can think our way into better, and it's all because of your presence, of your presence in our lives. Help us to go about our week, to take this, to be introspective, and give us clarity. We thank you for Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen. All right, go ye and think differently.